All right, guys, here we are. It's the last one of the year, man. Unfortunately, this is your host, Mike Wahle. This is Block Party. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching all year. If you've been enjoying this, hit the subscribe button, rate and review us, share us with your NFL family. Certainly, thanks to Andy Herman all year for putting us on his Pack a Day podcast and sharing the platform. I really appreciate that, Andy. You're the best. Let's get into it. I'm not going to break down this tape, and I started watching it again for the third time this morning, and I don't even know why I do it. You're glutton for punishment, I guess. I have this. I have a. Let me start by saying this before we get into this stuff, because we have to have. This is some tough conversations here. Like, I have a deep affinity and love and respect for the Green Bay Packers organization, the people in the building that have been there for the last 30 years. So many great people. I know Dr. Pat McKenzie is retiring this year. He is one of the best human beings I've ever been around. As is so many people in that building, too many to mention. And so, this isn't a, I'm not a fan. I'm a guy who played there, who left and immediately regretted it as soon as I did leave. The grass is greener idea, and somebody who just really values the relationships of the people in there and values the organization and what they stand for, and the community and what the fans stand for, and how great the experience is being able to be a part of that community. So I do have a different perspective on this. Certainly, I've tried to share that with you guys as best I can. I try to keep as, as reasonable as I possibly can when I have this, and not be too emotional in responses, because I do have a kind of a player and a coach perspective, and I think that's a little bit different maybe than what's on social media from time to time. But listen, this game was really, really tough, right? We lose 31-27 to the Bears. And just, quick stat lines. Jordan Love had a really, really good, obviously, first half. But overall, 24 for 46, 323 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks, 1 sack, I think. Maybe for like a yard. But he just played lights out game. You don't expect to lose a football game when your quarterback has those kind of numbers. You certainly don't want to throw the ball 46 times. But the same things as you go into and watch the tape and you watch the flow of the game. There's a couple of things that stand out. And the number one thing is once again on offense, Josh Jacobs. He has a pretty good first half, but we just got completely shut down up front, whether it was the tight ends or the receivers not being able to execute their blocks, whether it was the scheme. He ended up 19 for 55, 49 in the first half. We had 22 total non-quarterback carries of the football. So we had Josh Jacobs for 19 carries. I think we had 2 end arounds, and I think Wilson had a big run, and that's it. And you're up 21-3 at half, and you just, that part of it is perplexing, I think, to somebody like me. I've never seen, I'll start by saying this. I've never seen, we can talk about the Bears offense and the Packers D in a minute, but I have never seen a mental collapse up front like this team did in the second half. I thought, listen, when you start talking about Rasheed Walker, contract year, came into the season and there was this, this back and forth, should we give Jordan Morgan a chance at left tackle? He got to play in the preseason. Rasheed Walker is an established veteran that I think came into the season and had high expectations for his contract year. I don't think over the course of the season, I think if you asked him, I would guess he'd say he played well, but he'd like to have played better, which is the case for many, many players in the National Football League. In this game in particular, in the second half, as you watch the game and you watch the just what he's trying to execute, not even whether or not he's getting beat or not. He's either being coached to do something in a completely nonsensical way, or he just had like a lobotomy at halftime. I could say that about the scheme in general, the run game. Like there's some of the schemes that the Bears are running in the second half to shut everything down are ripe for taking advantage of, particularly in the run game. But we're schematically handling pressure looks in a way that, at least to my eye, is completely non-traditional. If they're running a nickel slot with an end down and a backer around, there's ways to pick that up with the offensive line that you don't have to add a receiver trying to cut somebody off into a play side play. when your backside, if you're the left tackle and you're running some play action and your backside hinging and you're not popping out and the defensive end gets 2 free hits on the quarterback, doesn't make sense. I mean, it's not that you're not doing, it's not that you're getting beat, it's that you're not even trying. When you've got a strong safety or a nickel slot coming off the left side and your tackle's leaving the defensive end for the running back and blocking out on the strong safety, it's not something that I'm used to seeing. So those things make me think, and look, like Adam Stenavich is Matt LaFleur, Adam Stenavich, Luke Butkus, like these guys are all going to be heated up this week because of this performance. I can't, it's really hard because there's so many mental errors in this game. And there's mental errors every week, but if you go into a game as an offensive line, and if you have a decent offensive line, let's say everybody, the way that they get graded in their meeting rooms after a game is usually something to the effect of like you have like this like execution grade plus minus and like a mental grade, like did you do your assignment, missed assignment grade plus minus. Usually everything's on the execution side. Maybe you have like one missed assignment, right? There are so many missed assignments in this game, unless I just have no idea how to watch tape. There are so many missed assignments or like missed opportunities to adjust something, at the line of scrimmage, that at some point it's, a lot of people in the media will go to and say, look, it's not the coach's, it's not the coach's fault this guy couldn't block this guy. It's not the coach's fault this guy didn't make the catch. It's not the coach's fault that this guy didn't make the tackle. And I do agree with that. At the end of this, where you want to place your blame, I think, is more localized to who you are. Like, in other words, if I'm a player, I'm going to take ultimate responsibility for what I do. But I also know because of that I can't rely on anybody else to make sure that I'm in my preparation phase getting done what I need to get done. I know I have to do that myself. I think the way that this generation is, I think the way that the NFL has become with the lack of preparation, I think the college schemes, all of that stuff builds into this idea that at some stage, to the people on social media or the experts that are saying at some point you have to do all this stuff, I agree with you. But at the same time, the responsibility is to teach basic body mechanic positions so you can be low enough to make that tackle, so you can run through that potential tackle, so you can make that block, so you do have a good profile. So to make sure that as a receivers coach, are all your guys taking 100, 200 jugs machine catches after practice? So I think there's at the very least, there's a responsibility from the staff as well, because remember, with this generation of athletes coming up through high school, usually it's a funnel, right? Best guys get through. College schemes are simple. It's athleticism. Best guys get through. We draft on a lot of teams, including the Packers, draft on RAS scores and tangibles or some variation of that. At some point, you get to the big leagues and you realize, oh, this isn't that easy, or I'm dropping the ball, or I'm missing these, or I have too much information in my brain. I'm not executing. I don't know how to get my profile. My body mechanics aren't the right way. Well, you've never had to fix that because you've always been the best athlete. So the responsibility is in large part on the coaching staff or that player to go outside of the coaching staff isn't helping them to make sure that you can do this basic stuff at the highest level. And what you see continually from players, not only on this team, but others, is that they're not doing all these things. And at some stage, it's like, yeah, the players have to execute. And I'm blame a player. In this situation, like I'm a victim blamer. Like, what if you didn't do your job, like that's on you. It's not on anybody else. But I think the reality is when you're trying to build a culture and a program and you're trying to talk about your preparation and, your standards of execution and all these things, it has to come from the building that your expectation is at the highest level. Just what everybody thinks about when they think about the New England Patriots with Bill Belichick for the first 17 or 18 years of his time there with Tom Brady. So I just think it's, when you watch this tape, the breakdown, it's easy to say, well, we We didn't lose our heads. We just aren't executing. Well, those are the same things. That's the same thing. And it looked like, to my eye, as I'm watching this game, like everyone's waiting for the other shoe to drop. Once they go 3 and out a couple times, the Bears are putting together some drives. I mean, Ben Johnson's fourth down play calling. Again, you can point to a bunch of stuff in these games, but you take away some of his decisions on fourth down. For all the what ifs with the McManus kicks and whatnot, it's like this game could have gone completely different in a number of different ways. But ultimately, results-based business, and this has happened a lot, and you start asking yourself, okay, like, where do we go from here? Bears offense. Caleb Williams, 24 for 48, 50% right down the line, 361 yards, had 2 picks on fourth down, had 2 touchdowns. But again, it was really the catalyst for them moving the ball. The Packers did a good job for the most part of stopping their rushing game. They were 28 for 93. I think it was like 3.3, 3.4 yards a game, a carry. Like, did a really, really nice job for the most part. But again, especially early in the game, like, what's the difference between the offensive execution for the Bears in the first and the second half? It's like, well, they stopped doing a lot of the cutesy shit. Now they still got into it with that fourth down play that you're trying to get DJ Moore on the backside corner, but on fourth one play. But you take away a lot of the inside handoffs and the DJ Moore handoffs in the backfield and this and that, and you just start running the football downfield. You go play action. You get the medium routes where you're trying to hit guys in stride, which is what he's good at. And it's like a lot of those things start happening. I don't really know where to start, so maybe we just go right into listener questions. I got a ton of them, and I appreciate you guys all for doing this all season. It was a lot of fun. One thing that did stand out in the game, a stat, and I'm not a huge stats guy, but Packers were 40% on third down, 3 for 3 on the fourth down, but the Bears were 53% on third down. That's a really good conversion rate. 53% is really good conversion rate for the playoffs. Let's start the narrative, and I know we're going to talk about Matt LaFleur and whether or not he should, what that looks like moving forward. I'll say this. Here's the reality. The Packers are 1-3 in the postseason the last 4 years. The Packers have 3 wins against playoff teams in the last 2 years. They've been the 7th seed 3 years in a row. They have no division title since Aaron Rodgers left. And Matt LaFleur has been in Green Bay, which you really don't realize until you have to sit and think about it. This was his 7th season in Green Bay. And I only bring that number up, and I brought that up to Andy Herman. When I was younger, when I was playing, the idea was in a lot of buildings was that a good coach, your voice and your messaging starts wearing out after 7 years. And that's not true for everybody. But when you start talking about the Cowers, the Tomlins, the Belichicks, the Carrolls, the guys that maybe push past that time, they all win Super Bowls. And so I think it's a very valid and interesting discussion, to say the least. But let's get into some listener questions here. Oh, man, there's a lot of them here. Okay. Let's start with these I put up. So we got, the basic thing. Where do we go from here? Does a coach lose the locker room after this kind of breakdown? I think the first thing that Ed Policy has to do is make a determination of and whether or not he thinks this is did he think this is a Super Bowl roster? Everything points to the idea that this is a Super Bowl roster because they added Micah Parsons on a monster deal. And typically you don't add a player of that caliber for that cost unless you think you have a very finite window to the Super Bowl. Now, I'll say that and then also say moving forward, you now have Micah Parsons under contract. You now have Jordan Love under contract, which are your two, for this room, major pieces. Now, you don't have a corner under contract that is a real number one corner in the National Football League. You don't have a wide receiver You could say that Christian Watson is going to be that number one receiver. Obviously, you don't have a Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson, but you do. You could. I'm very comfortable saying Christian Watson is a true number one, and he just signed an extension for I think $9 or $11 million, which is a ton of money to you and me, but in the world of the National Football League, like he's going to ask for 4 times that at least. So that's not there yet. But I say all this to say this window is open for the next 2 to 3 years, right? Because you have your 2 major contracts taken care of. And then I think you have to start looking at, well, the probably the most important question is, does the coach lose the locker room? I think everybody answered the questions in the locker room post-game as they're supposed to. We don't know, or at least I don't know, what goes on in their meeting rooms, what level of detail, what level of like, I have a lot of friends that are in that building, so I am privy to information that I don't share here, but it does form a bit of an opinion for me. But I don't know what goes on in some of those meeting rooms or on the practice field. I'm not there every day. But I would tell you, based on what we see when we see some of the breakdowns, we have a talented roster. There are, unfortunately, I think when you have glaring problems across the offense and the defensive line, and you don't have a lockdown corner, but let's just start with glaring problems across the offensive defensive line, which you had as soon as Micah Parsons got hurt. They made some very questionable moves in free agency, bringing in Aaron Banks to replace Elgin Jenkins, to replace Josh Sitton. Not Josh Sitton. What am I talking about? Josh Myers. That was something that was very difficult for me to process early on. And throughout the season, you could see, I think obviously with Jenkins getting hurt and Sean Ryan doing a pretty good job there throughout the course of the season, like they have a lot of decisions to make there, but that was a questionable deal. Bringing in Nate Hobbs, as a slot corner, putting him outside or thinking about putting him outside. Obviously he gets the injury, but then doesn't come back and play at the level that your expectations. It was a rough free agency period for Goody. I know that those guys probably work in tandem as far as like what we're trying to address. At some point, whether it's Butkus, whether it's Stenovich, they're putting their stamp on bringing in Banks, for example. They're running their stamp on that and saying like, okay, we think this move is going to be for the best. Jenkins, we want you to move over to center, blah, 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 blah. So I think that was very those are things you have to look at now and go, like, okay, now we do have the benefit of hindsight. Did that make sense? Not addressing our departure of TJ Slayton, who was a very, very underrated player last year. Trading away Kenny Clark for Micah Parsons, everybody's going to take that trade. Like, Micah Parsons is generational, but you did not address the defensive tackle position. Now, Wyatt was playing better, but you don't have depth there with any size. And then when Wyatt gets hurt, you literally don't have any size. And that's something that even if the run game, if they come back and go, well, they were 22 for 93, Mike, you're an idiot. Like, okay, well, what did they have to give up in order to do that? Versus you watch like the Eagles play yesterday. They don't have to give up anything. They'll just stay in their box, attack with their 3-4 look or their nickel look and say like, my defensive line can hold up. We're good, right? Maybe we move a guy from the B gap to the A gap on a slant stunt, but they don't have to bring down Evan Williams every time. They don't have to rock and roll their slant their side and bring a nickel guy. Like they don't have to do any of that because of the personnel that they have. And so it's easy to talk about all the glamorous positions, but the reality is like if you're not good up front, and we're not good up front, we're not elite up front, like there are so many things that you have to do to mask that, whether it's banging out your tight ends and running backs every single play, right? Whether it's running different stunts or dogs and pressures with your linebackers and safeties and slanting your defensive line and putting them in bad situations where they have to run horizontally when the running back wants to run vertically. And then putting your coverage in a bad place, particularly when you don't have lockdown corners. Does it affect all the menu that you have from a running game standpoint? Like, are you comfortable running inside zone, outside zone, pin and pull, guard tackle counters, traps, power plays, etc.? Do you have a good tight end room? Well, we lose Tucker Kraft, but do you have a backup tight end? Do you have a 6 O-line package going into the season? Now, we certainly had one towards the end of the season, and I think for the most part it served us well. But that's something that you saw from some other teams that if you have the depth, if you have the opportunity, maybe that makes some more sense and feeds into like what you really are with a downhill runner like Josh Jacobs. So I think that when you talk about losing the locker room, I think players are going to say the right things, and they might they probably have good relationship with Matt and their staff, but that doesn't mean, first of all, a lot of these guys that's so young, that's the only coaching staff they've had, so they don't know if there's something from a discipline standpoint, from an expectation standpoint, anything better. But I think the other thing that it does point to is, even if they're speaking in positive terms, which I'm sure they are very genuine, I don't think that means they aren't acknowledging that there's some deficiencies on the team. Like if I'm, when I was playing, we have the top 3 offense every year. Our defense wasn't very good. Now, we're not going to go out and be like, we got to get new D tackles or whatever. Pick a position. You're not going to go out and just say that. But you have to do that. Like guys are smart. Guys know who is available during the offseason. Guys know, who's available in the draft. Players know who's, who can we bring in to make this team better. Guys know, and here's the other thing that we talk about, the PFF and all these, this guy graded out so well. This guy was an all-pro according to this. The stats are good. There are schemes and systems that are better to play in depending on your position than others. And so guys understand who's available, who's good or deficient on your team, what scheme works, what makes the most sense, like what's easy to play in, what's quarterback friendly, what's O-line friendly, what's defensive end friendly. Guys know that. And so I don't think they're losing the locker room by keeping Matt LaFleur by any stretch. But that doesn't mean, one, that there might be an alternative out there that might supercharge or kickstart this team into something better, or two, that if guys are coming back saying we really want Matt back, we think he's a great leader of men, and we think he's the right guy for the culture of this team and all that, that they don't acknowledge as well, at least privately, that there's other pieces of the puzzle that were clearly missing and are not being addressed or haven't been addressed as to this point. So I'm going to bounce around here a little bit. What happened in the second half? Did the Bears adjust or the Packers just freeze up? We talked about this a little bit. From the jump of the second half, when the Packers got the ball, the first couple series are a travesty in execution, missed assignments. Now, you don't know if that means specifically are we like just having these mental errors? Or schematically, was this just didn't make sense? Is it one guy or two guys? Guys are getting beat physically, but more guys were getting beat on just mental assignments. And then what happens is you get beat on a couple of those mental assignments. Then as you go through the entire second half, and I know they had that one good drive, but you go through the entire second half and you feel the snowball rolling faster downhill, you start freezing up and you start playing a little bit more tense, right? And you could see the other team was doing the exact opposite. And so, everybody's been through that. I remember the Atlanta game when we lost the first game under 25 degrees for the first time in 30 years or something like that. We looked over and Atlanta was just, we beat the hell out of those guys on offense earlier in the season. And they were over there just jumping up and down, ready to go. And I remember going they're here to play. And they beat the shit out of us. And, after a certain point during that game, you're like, it happens. You're like, I can't believe this. You start thinking about things. You start thinking about shit that doesn't really matter in the moment instead of just addressing the problem. So I think that the Bears made some good adjustments, particularly you look on And they started bringing pressure on defense. They plotted out a man, assuming that we're going to try to go for some short stuff. There were some wide ass open plays with Jordan Love, but unfortunately, mostly because of missed assignments not getting physically beat, his eyes had to go somewhere else. So he had to escape the pocket, especially early on. What do you think of Ben Johnson's post-game proclamation? I caught some heat on this because I think a lot of things that are in the locker room shouldn't get shown to other people outside of the locker room. I hate that there are cameras in the locker room at all. I know that, his little chant has gone viral. I know that across the league with so many of these guys, I think it's part of the fan experience. And look, there's so much of this stuff that used to be sacred and is not sacred anymore. And I think in a very closed environment, you talk like that, or a lot of people talk like that. And it's not considered classless or anything. It's just like, what, those guys were talking shit. We beat the hell out of them. This is my response to my team. But unfortunately, it came out on that. But I do think broadly, there is and always has been, the Packers that I were playing, we never thought the Bears were our big rival. But we thought the Vikings were because they had Culpepper and Moss and Carter and, Robert Smith and all those guys, John Randall, McDaniel, all these, God, so many good players up there. But we never thought the Bears were our rivals. The Bears were always kind of like we were their rivals, but not vice versa. So I think what you're seeing now, and same thing with the Lions. And I think what you're seeing now is the Lions have been on the come up, obviously. And now you see the Bears on the come up, and they're like, no, we're here, and you guys don't have this air of superiority that where you can, hey, yeah, we want this team, we're this and that. It's like, okay, you're going to get what you asked for, and you have to show up. You're not riding the coattails of Aaron Rodgers. You're not riding the coattails of Brett Favre. You haven't won a division in 5 years. You have been the 7th seed for the last 3 seasons. You are 1-3 for the last 4 seasons. This is the youngest team in the National Football League for the last 2 or 3 years, right? Or at least close to it. So don't come in here talking like you've done something when you haven't. I think I'm putting a lot into that very small phrase that he used, but that's kind of where I think these other teams, I know for a fact, this is how the other teams feel. And it's a little bit of a warning shot across the bow. And, you can like that or not like that, or appreciate it or not appreciate it, but I think that's what it is. Speaking specifically, a lot of people ask this, and this was more like a Matt LaFleur comment or a question. When you're into your 8th year now, if they're going to re-up him, where do you go? And can a zebra change his stripes? Can some of the things that we've seen be overcome? And again, I can't speak directly from the preparation standpoint. I can only tell you the results that I see on game day and what I continue to see. And listen, I think one of the things that's difficult, having played as long as I did, having the affection that I do for that team, but also trying to be objective as possible, is that I do have a deep respect for how difficult it is to be a coach in the National Football League. I have a deep respect for what Matt LaFleur has to go through as a head coach for the Green Bay Packers, which is, in my opinion, the best organization in sports, right? Best fan base, best stadium, best facilities, best organization, best support staff, etc. So that is a very, very difficult job, very, very time-consuming job. Mike Sherman used to sleep in a cot under his desk. This isn't I know they get paid well and everything, but this is a very hard damn job. So you have to appreciate that. Having said that, this team I don't feel like this is a tough football team. And I don't know where that comes from. I have my ideas. I don't like the execution you see under pressure. I love what you see from, Jordan Love, a majority of the football game. I love what you see from Josh Jacobs. But there's when you get drafted to a team or you're a free agent, there's guys that are going to be good no matter what. They have the right coach in the room. They got the right mentor from a player standpoint. They're just physically, they're really, really good athletic players. They're heady. Maybe they have a high football IQ coming in, the right demeanor. There's something, okay? So let's say you got 7 of those guys on your team. You are working your ass off as a coaching staff to make sure the other 40 some odd guys, 46 guys, 45 guys have their shit together, are soldiers, right? Can do exactly what they're told when it's called upon, like almost unemotionally, like they are automatic in their execution. You know exactly what you're going to get from them, right? And they have flair, they have personality, they have all that they bring to the game, they have passion. But when it comes to like doing what it is that is required of you, they have been drilled so many times. They have spent so much time preparing. They have so much time film work. They have such a deep understanding of who they're playing and what their tendencies are that it's like, I've got this down pat. I communicate at a high level pre and post snap. My mind, my processing unit is high elite level. You don't see that as much, I think, from this team. And so in order to continue ed policy, Goody, whoever's in charge, you have to make sure that these guys are reevaluating how they prepare this team. I'll take it back to this with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll gets to Seattle, right? Pete says, you know what? I see the model right now with the NFL, but I've had so much success at USC. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to draft guys that want to be legends in the game, right? I want to draft guys. I'm going to ask them like, what do you want out of the National Football League? And I want to be in the Hall of Fame. I want to be one of the guys they talk about. Then I'm going to work the hell out of those guys. I'm going to be the most competitive practice team in the National Football League. I'm going to run a relatively simple scheme that my guys can execute and communicate at a high level. I'm talking about defense now, but you can talk about either side. And I'm going to put them through it every single day because they're young and they can handle it. And I'm going to build my mini dynasty doing that. And I can tell you from firsthand commentary about players that were on those teams that came to other teams, they were like, most people on the team I'm on could not practice with the team I was on because Seattle practices way harder than everybody else in the National Football League. And then what Pete would say is like, and then we'll just recycle, right? Well, it's college, 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. And really, if you just kind of think about what was the demise of Pete, if there was a demise of Pete in Seattle, it was like, well, you had to start paying some of these guys that were playing so well, and then you start paying those guys, the power dynamics change, and that's where where you lose your voice, right? But Matt's got to figure out, I've got this youngest team in the league. Am I the hardest practicing team in the league? Am I the team in the league that is preparing to be the toughest? Like, I'm going to go run through a wall and I'm going to be clap back on everything and just be able to play through the echo of the whistle. And am I practicing to be that kind of group? Or am I trying to be the youngest team in the league because I like the contract situation and I'm trying to be like more of a finesse team? I think that's really tough. I think you get found out in the playoffs when you do that. That's my opinion. So I think it can be done, but I think you have to make it fundamental, kind of changing the way you think about things. Let's get over to some of the stuff we have on Twitter right now. God, there's so many. Okay. If Matt LaFleur stays, what are the changes in staff player positions you would make if you were Goot? How would you fix second half issues that plague the team and lack of toughness? And then there's another question is, what is the one thing you would change about the O-line room, players, coaches to get better from that group? Okay. So, look, I'm an O-line guy. I coach O-line guys. I would make sure that my offensive line was really, really good at the basics of the sport. Are they, is your footwork, your pad level, your profile into contact, your hand positioning, like, are you just elite at that? And then or in conjunction with, then you would start looking at your scheme and going like, are we trying to defeat scheme using too many external people, a la wide receivers, tight ends, etc.? Like, do we have a system where if I've got to run the football, I can get a nickel and run the football. I can get into 12 and run the football, right? What am I good at? What can I get good at? What do these guys do well? I think a good offensive line does literally everything well, right? But the reality is if you've got a 330-pound guard, maybe you don't want to run punt and pull with him, unless he's Penei Sewell or some freak athlete. So the number one thing though is, can you be automatic in the best of the basics? Do you have people in that room that are teaching that at a high level? And then that allows you to use more brain power, right, to process information, communicate, and make decisions. And then we have to clearly, especially if you look at the second half of this game, you have to be a lot better at that. So changes. Here's the other thing with Matt. Matt's a play caller. How much I've always thought that I would always like to or prefer to have a culture commander at head coach that maybe has an area of expertise, but also has somebody, whether it's Steno or somebody else, that is like a really whiz kid play design, play caller guy that can maybe take some of that off his plate so he can be a culture guy. One thing with Sherman that I recall that the defensive guys, a part of it is because he was general manager, but it was like there was certainly a disconnect between Sherm and the defensive guys. Well, because our defensive wasn't as good, but also because he's like an offensive coordinator, and so he was for most, off and on he was a play caller. So I think there's something there too, and obviously you Dan Campbell just said it. I'm calling plays. Maybe that means that I don't have to lose a play caller, and that's a positive, right? But these are all things you have to consider. But gosh, man, I certainly think that there are really, really good coaches in the world that are better technical coaches that are in that room. I think that scheme is and understanding the structures of defenses and offenses and how to manipulate them is a skill in itself. That's something that I'm not as good at as one of the best guys in the National Football. Like if you look at the Niners offensive line coach, Chris Foerster, those guys are elite at that, right? So I think you need both guys in the room, and that's why you have in the O-line room you should have two guys, right? One guy's really good at this, one guy's really good at that. Put them together, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And I think you do that in a lot of rooms. And that's something that, just speaking generally, what I would be a huge proponent of, what I pitch to every team I talk to is you're either your first or second guy should be a technical specialist, and your other guy should be really, really good at scheme. And you put those two together, right? Because unfortunately, there are not a lot of guys in the league, and there are some clearly, but I'm talking about every position now, that are really good at both. That's why most of these guys are outside hunting around looking for, guys like me to help them with their technical stuff. Talked about the O-line in the second half. Do I think that they have the right pieces in the O-line to significantly improve it next year? No. I mean, okay, so Jenkins is probably gone. Rasheed Walker is probably gone. Based on last night, I have to imagine he's gone. Jordan Morgan moves to left tackle. You've got Banks, Sean Ryan, Belton, Zach Tom. Zach Tom not being there last night was huge because they got to help that side so much, and it changes your offense. So Jordan Morgan, somebody's throwing up, Jordan Morgan did this in the game. It's like, yeah, man, how many times did we, chip out, or how many times did the tight end stay in? Not that he did anything wrong, but all of that does matter, right? And by the way, I thought he played well last night or 2 nights ago, whatever it was. But all that stuff matters. If you have Zach Tom, you have to do that. Okay, and you have to do it on one side, and then you can see what happens to Rasheed, Walker on the other side when they maybe don't have as many chip outs because Zach Tom's not there, and they, you kind of understand how that works, right? So, how do they improve that side? I would say this. I think that a well-coached unit with that group, I think, could be a lot better than they were this year. A lot better. I think coaching in that room is that important. I think that group, what I just mentioned, you go across the board, Morgan, Banks, Ryan, Belton, Tom, I think can be a high performing group with some really, really good, detailed, demanding coaching next year. Who should they? I don't think Bucks will be here next year. Who should they hire outside to be O-line coach? Would you coach the O-line? Yeah, sure. Would you take a position on the staff? Okay, there's a lot of. That's not how the NFL works. That's not how the NFL works. Having said that, if I was ever going to consult with the Packers in that, I would be. Certainly something I would pick up that phone. With now extension seemingly all but inked, what's your next step if you're Matt LaFleur? Clean house to see how good position coaches, maybe hire an OC to play call and focus on leading this team. Yeah, that's exactly what we were just talking about. Absolutely. Be the GM. In your opinion, what are the top 3 things you think need to change to turn this team into a force? Assuming everybody's healthy next year. Defensive tackle, and not just one guy depth. When Campanelli left, I thought Quay played well this year, but are we as good at linebacker this year? So maybe, okay, let's go. I think we need to change some position coaches. I think we need personnel-wise, you need defensive tackle. And I think you have to draft a cornerback. I think you have to draft a corner. And you have to solidify your defensive line, draft a corner. Look, they're not going to spend any more money on the offensive line. They're not, because they first round draft pick it next year, first round draft pick left tackle, $20 million a year left guard, third round draft pick center, second round draft pick right guard, and top three, I don't know, whatever, really good right tackle. So they're not going to put any more money into that. And they just paid him too. Thinking of Quay Walker's comments about these losses happening back before his time, how does the team break out of there, and how do we go again mentality? Yeah, so Quay made some really interesting comments. I think the thing here about that too is, like, I really don't believe in like these things hanging over you as a playing group, but I think they can hang over you as a staff. Like, I love DQ. When DQ lost 28-3 comeback in the Super Bowl, like, was the Falcons team ever the same? Part of that was because they have, and that's players and staff. Like, I think that does hang over your head maybe a little bit. But, when you're talking about, fresh meat in the building, not necessarily year to year, but like, you got the youngest team in the league here for like a couple of years now, man. Like, it's stuff that happened in the past. They probably don't even know about, but I do think his experiences matter. And then understanding how to learn from those experiences. What I'm always interested in when a team doesn't perform well, and like I was on a lot of these teams, right? Because only one team can win the Super Bowl, and if you don't win it, you're always disappointed. And you lose games you feel like you should win. Is like, and I'm just trying to think back right now because I haven't really thought about this in a while. When we lost the 4th and 26 game, and then you come back the next year, like, we didn't do anything, now I'm thinking about it, like, we didn't really do anything different the next year because we were like, oh, like, we were better. We thought we were the best team in the NFC, and we thought we were in a position where we were definitely going to go beat the Panthers, and we were going to be in the Super Bowl, the Patriots Super Bowl there. And we offensive line is arguably the strength of our team, and our run game, we shit down our leg on a 4th and goal. And then that led to Sherman not trusting us on a 4th and 1. And there's all these other things that happen that leads to the 4th and 26. It leads to the pass 66 where you throw the pick, and, it leads to all that stuff. But, fundamentally, when you break it down to a couple of things that you can control, it's like, do we go back and do we make sure that we're the number 1 team in short yardage? And I just don't, I don't remember. I'm sure they had discussions about it, but I don't remember if that was like a point of emphasis. Like, maybe that's what you need to do in the offseason. Something about Matt. We lost. It says Matt said again they lose because of details and execution errors, but that's nothing new. It's been said for many years. Same thing always happens. How can that SB be improved? Better coaches, lack of a winning culture. Is it up to each player? Yes to everything. We've talked about it. Details and execution are another way to say that is like, are you prepared to do the thing when the thing's called? When your number is called, are you prepared to do what is required? And if you've prepared, Achilles, we don't rise to the level of our expectations, we fall to our level of our training. I think if you go into that situation prepared, like, anything can happen, you can make mistakes, but I think your opportunities or your chances of being successful go way up. And so then what is that? And I think for me, again, like, the only thing I can point to with all this stuff is like the standards. Because if everybody likes what we're doing on defense and Hafley comes in, you see the definitive difference between pre-Hafley and now, right? and obviously injuries and this and that and the other thing. And I know, obviously this game didn't turn out the way you want, but you love the way, like Hafley's going to be a head coach because he came in and it was a certain way, and then he left and it was completely different. And or he's there now, excuse me, and it's completely different. And he's changed. And what has he really done? My opinion, he's changed the culture of the team. He's changed the priorities of what's important with that team. Tackling, safety alley tackling, pattern recognition, communication, running to the football, except for Rashawn Gary. For whatever reason, that's another story. It's real sad to see. That is what is the big change with the team. So when you talk about all this other stuff, it's like it feels like a culture change. Who's more at fault for the roster underperforming? Yeah, that's always tough, right? And you don't know how much they always communicate. And I always assume I was in Miami when they would not bring in the players that the coaches wanted, and that sucked. Like that was ugly. And that wasn't all the whole time I was there. That was really the first year. It'd been going on for a while though. So I think that they're doing a good job of communicating. And I think the roster is pretty good. It goes back to, for me, it's real simple now with the NFL. If you're not good up front, look, Joe Burrow's a top 3 quarterback in this league. He's got Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Zach has never put either the coaching or the personnel in place to block, or the scheme to block for him. And they did make the Super Bowl, but they've underwhelmed. And if you point to one thing on the Bengals, why do you continue to underwhelm? Yeah, their defense up and down. They were Lou Anarumo, he was there. All of a sudden they don't like it. He's going to be a head coach. All of a sudden they don't like him after 1 year. Blah, blah, blah. It's bullshit, right? What is the one consistent thing they've lacked? They can't pass pro. It's not hard. When talking about player development, it seems to me over the last couple of collective bargaining agreements, the league and the players agreed that player development would be primarily player responsibility due to lack of off-season programming, shorter training camp, and limited padded practice during the season. Am I accurate in assessment, or am I missing something? No, you're right. Seems like you don't spend enough time with the coaches in the practice field with them to make meaningful steps in development. So, yeah, I'll try to make a very, very long story short. NFL wanted more games. They went on this huge safety kick because of the concussion, the CT stuff. The players, the NFLPA, realized, and they wanted a bigger piece of the pie. Something had to give. The players took concessions. The players like, okay, safety, we don't want to put our helmets on. Sanders didn't want to touch a football because Peyton Manning was coming back from injury, and Jeff Saturday didn't want to touch a ball in the offseason. So the NFLPA was like, hey, okay, we don't want to have to do all these things we have to do in the offseason. And the owners are like, oh, is that what you guys do? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine. We don't even care. Oh, and then we can say that we're being safer, so then we can get our 17, 18 games, which is what they're going to do next. So all they've done is made the league is worse. I mean, the league is look, better athletes. I mean, more evolved humans, training less, doing things that are more specific, but not necessarily better. And it's the social media age where like I can look into information up that doesn't make me an expert, right? Like having a deep understanding of how to watch tape, for example. So if you want to be, I think the good news is, or the reality is, if you want to be in the top percentile and you see how much more like you see how much more a guy who elevates his game, how much more in millions of dollars a year they get paid. That any reasonable common sense player would be like, okay, if I'm going to get paid $10 million a year and the top guy in my position is making $20 million a year, and all I got to do to get from here to there is like go find somebody who's going to help me be better, and they're not doing it here. That ain't that's the biggest no-brainer in the world, right? So I do think that it has it has turned out that way. I think the biggest misnomer that is I feel bad for is like the people who lost out the most in this is the coaches. Because coaches, at least the old generation of coaches, like their number one thing they want to do is be with the players. Right. So you're at the work for 16 hours, you get 3 hours of the players, best 3 hours of your day. The rest of the time you gotta be in these shitty meetings, you gotta like draw stuff up on cards. Like you don't want to do any of that. Like what you want to do is you want to coach your players. And now even the offseason, they can't do it. So I actually think they got screwed. Because nobody was thinking about like they don't have a coaches union that was like, hey, wait a second, we want to work with our guys, And I think the good coaches out there like are pissed about it. And I know I've talked to like particularly quarterback coaches. They're like, we don't get to spend any time with our quarterbacks, and our quarterbacks, are going to these other guys, we're doing this and that. And from their perspective, it's like why are we doing this? Why don't we just allow the quarterbacks to come in and spend more time in the building? Like what quarterback is getting beat up so bad that they can't practice some more or like watch some more tape, But this is the agreement that they made. It sucks, but it's just the reality of the sport right now. This Dale's asking if Harbaugh would take a special teams coordinator position. No, he'll be a head coach. Sorry, no chance. Why did our running game struggle so much in short yardage situations? We're not physical up front, although we got a lot better. We run a lot of shotgun stuff. Doesn't make a lot of sense. We get too cute. Under center works. I don't know the numbers for the Packers, but league wide, it's like it works like 20 or 30% better, more times. But we don't really have a tush push. I remember the last short yardage, we got beat backside by Roquan Smith and against the Ravens, and just got out executed, But it was out of gun, I think. Yeah, it was out of gun, which just slows down the running back effectively. I think Rich Bisaccia should be fired. Every game was lost due to special teams. That's not true, but I get your point. I think of the thing about Rich, when you have a guy, and I've talked about this before, if you have a guy that if you have a position like special teams that's constantly bad, then and you're cycling through coordinators, and then you have a guy all of a sudden that like ticks all the boxes, like supposed to be the best guy in the league, blah blah blah, and they're still no good. It's like it's not his fault. Like it's something else. Like, he's obviously getting enough time, resources. Josh Jacobs decides to go run the football back for the first time, and you're like, well, that was a good idea. Or Keyshawn Nixon gets back there because it's the playoffs again. You're like, oh, he wasn't an all-pro and we stopped using him. Oh, okay, it's not. I don't think it's Rich Bisaccia. This guy's just talking shit. Can the Packers really continue with game? Let's enjoy this game because we're about to have a few more seasons just like it when we extend. It's terrible. How many times did the Packers beat a better team? I think 3 times in playoff teams in the last 2 seasons. How often have they lost to a worse team? Yeah, the thing is, there is parity in the National Football League. Like every team, every given Sundays, that saying is valid for a reason, or it's around for a reason. I think this problem, are things getting better or staying mediocre? I think that's the real question you have to ask. And again, I said all the stats before, like 3 years in a row, 7th seed, 3-10 against, the playoff teams or teams with a better record. No division titles in 4 or 5 years. There's some stuff where you're like, the big thing for me, I'll go back to it because I'm not in favor of like just changing regimes, for nothing. And this one, and the other thing is like, you got to look at it policy. Like, okay, if Harbaugh wants to come here, it's like, okay, that's awesome. Right. Who's going to be your OC, blah, 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 blah. But it's not like, and there's a lot of young guys, like, listen, like I know there's at least 1 or 2 guys in Sean McVay's room. Like if you coach with Sean McVay, that's like a Willy Wonka's golden ticket, man. Like you're going to get interviews. And so I'm sure there's somebody there, maybe with Shanahan too. But if you're going to bring in a guy now to get rid of Matt and bring in somebody different, like you got to bring in a different kind of guy, right? Like you got to bring in a Harbaugh because Harbaugh's not anything like Matt. You got to bring in. Does it need to be an older guy? Does it need to be a more gruff guy? Does it need a defensive guy? Does it need to be an offensive guy because you don't want to lose the play calling ability? Is this the right from what we know about the coaches that just got fired, is this the right free agency period to bring in, to look at a new guy? That stuff's all something that policy's got to understand. I go back to this, though, and I'm just, this has nothing to do with Matt at all. It's the 7-year thing. The 7-year thing with no Super Bowls seems like you've had 7 years. There's no Super Bowls on the shelf. Like, that's hard for me. Yeah, it says here, like, you don't confuse a likable head coach with how good he is a Standards title town. A lot of commentary just on this hire. If you often said the Packer line players have poor footwork, most of them are veterans, poor technique, no discipline, poor coaching. I'll be honest with you, man. Like, when I was playing, like, you just don't think about this stuff as much. I think you think about it more now because the tape's so available and there's so many people talking about it. But like, I didn't understand how bad my footwork was until like year 4 or 5. And then, then you go like, oh man, this is what I'm good at. And then you fix that. Right. And then I never, ever, when I was playing, thought about how important technique is as I do now. And I think that I can honestly say, I think that the guys that I work with are so much better playing and play out from a discipline standpoint than I ever was. And obviously part of that's their professionals, but part of it just because of the way that we think about it now. And you can see the difference between those guys and the guys that maybe they're on their team. They don't work we don't work with guys like me. It's so different because most guys just don't think about it because it's not being preached in the building. Bears did much more blitzing in the second half. O-line failed to replace slide the protection. Why so much confusion? He seemed to blame crowd noise. Yeah, maybe. The second half, man, the protection was, it just looked like you couldn't. There's so many mental errors. Couldn't believe it. What does working out a deal mean in NFL jargon after this kind of showing to end the season? I don't really think they want to keep Matt in a diminished role. That's not true. It would only be his head coach. Working out a deal means he could ask for $15 million because he knows people in Atlanta and Miami, and he might be look. If Matt LaFleur is not coaching the Packers next year, he's going to coach somewhere. And he'll get paid. Unfortunately for your career, Andy Herman, Mike Wahle is an OLO coach with Matt LaFleur's Kevin Green hire. I still expect my pods. Yep. Do the players talk today? I don't know. Maybe Ed Policy can light a fire. I love that. I'll tell you this, guys. Let's just end by saying this. Any positives? I think Belton had a good physical game. I saw Luke Musgrave try to step up and do the things that are required. If you look at the totality of the season, you see that you have a star in Evan Williams. You see that you have a potential star in Christian Watson. We have, there's questions about whether William Dobbs will be back next year from contract standpoint. You saw a future All-Pro in Tucker Kraft before he got hurt. You saw the impact that a guy like Micah Parsons can have on this team. I think Sean Ryan is a good replacement for Elton Jenkins at center, or Josh Myers, whoever you want to look at. But I think he's going to be, he could very easily be the center on this team for years to come. Now, what was just brought up about communication and all of that, I think that's it's a big deal. You have to be thought of. It certainly has to be thought about. I think the positive for this team is, if we're just being honest, and I look, man, you don't want anybody to get fired. I don't think about things this way, but I do look at it like, does this team need a culture change, and is 7 years too much time? But if you look at the roster, you have a Super Bowl caliber quarterback You have your guy on defense, Micah Parsons. You have two safeties that are excellent. I think you have two linebackers that are excellent. You have you still have a running back that it's high level. You have an all-pro caliber tight end coming back next year. I think you have a good wide receiver room. You really need to get better in the trenches. I mean, that's it. You got to get better in the trenches. And if you get better in the trenches, I think the sky's the limit for this football team, because there's just not that many there's not that many teams with the kind of talent across at levels in the defensive room or the offensive room that you have here. But I do think they need to have some help in the trenches. I tend to think that they need a culture change. Now, I will say this. A culture change can be as simple as changing one coach in the entire building that just demands something different. Because even if you are in one room, like let's say you're in the linebacker, let's say you're in the O-line room, and you just demand more, everyone's going to look at that room for a while and be like, those guys are crazy, and they'll make jokes and this and that. But eventually they're going to be like, what are we doing? Right? And in that room, for example, what happens? Running backs get better, right? Tight ends come and learn how to do this, right? Quarterback communication gets better. Everybody benefits. But you got to find that spark, and whether it's up to Ed or Matt or Goody, whoever, to find that spark, I think that's where it is. So listen, guys, this has been it's been fun for me. I don't know about anybody else, but I really appreciate everybody watching, asking the questions. Let me be part of your week. My guy here. I think that football is just such a great teacher of like life lessons, particularly about overcoming adversity, working with other people, and I think that these guys working under the microscope that is social media now, I don't know how I would have handled it. I was making this joke yesterday. Not a joke, actually, but when I was playing in the early 2000s, if like somebody was talking shit about me on social media, like you just go to that town and find that person, and I'm not saying that to be like a tough guy. It's just like we have, as a culture, we have adopted this emotional response, shit talk, let's just pound everybody into the ground. Life's, kind of, we're okay with that idea. And, these guys, the recipients, these guys who are out here in the arena, the man in the arena idea, who are out here just trying to do the best they can. Like, nobody wants to suck, right? Now, they might be doing everything they can, or maybe they don't know how. But these guys are out here trying not to, they're trying to do their best. And I think it's tough sometimes. It's tough for me to participate in some of this, because there's so many experts out there who look at PFF stats or throw a couple stats out and get people to yell at it and back and forth. And I'll just be honest with you guys. It's like, we used to be about educating and informing people and letting people, try to make people mini experts. And so they can have this deep appreciation and understanding of the sport. And now it's so much about shit talking and looking at stats that are non-contextualized to look like you know what you're talking about and winning arguments. Fighting the good fight, but sometimes it seems like it's not. I don't know if it's worth it or not. But listen, I do appreciate the guys that are out there and enjoying the show. If you are, man, if you're enjoying these breakdowns all year, we'll come back in the spring and I'll obviously try to do some stuff with Andy. But I don't know when the next one will be up, but I'll let you know. Until then, guys, thank you again. Enjoy your week and keep enjoying this football, man. It's fun as hell to watch.